G'day, Trent from Total Tools. We're in the workshop and we are installing Detroit 750mm industrial wall fans. We've already put 3 of them up and we're saving the last one because we think it's a great opportunity to show you the best way to assemble and install these awesome units. I know they're awesome units because we've had these things in our Penrith store for coming up to 14 years, running most days of the year, and we haven't had to replace a single one yet. So we know they're absolutely rock solid and they can blast the air out. They've got 3 speed settings and you can even hardwire them in. So really good units to have. Let's get to it. All right, we'll run through with the tools you're going to need. You're going to need a good knife, Stanley knife, to open the box. Need some side cutters because there's a few cable ties and other bits of wire in there. For the process, we're going to need, it's handy to have a pair of pliers with you, a flathead screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver. You're going to need a 19mm spanner. Ratcheting is even better. You can use spanners here, but we're going with sockets because it's 2025 and we don't need to do it the hard way. We've got a 10mm socket, 12mm socket, and 14mm socket. And again, because it's 2025, we don't have to use a manual ratchet. I'm doing it the easy way with a battery ratchet. Also for the installation, you're going to need a way of mounting it to the wall. It is a wall mount fan. We've got our impact driver, drill for pre-drilling, small spirit level, cutting fluid because we're going into steel, fixtures, and the drill bits. Of course, we're doing this to help you out to make sure you get this job very low on the F scale. And as a quick reminder of what the F scale is, the harder a job is, the more F's you've got to yell out to get it done. When the job is easier and the process is smoother, there's not so many F's being yelled out and the job's much more pleasant for everybody involved. And it gets done quicker. All right, most important tool and part of this process is make sure you've got someone filming. Because if you don't film the unboxing and stick it on social media, it didn't happen. And you know, people run their lives around unboxings on social media. Let's get cracking. All right, easiest way is to look for the taped up flaps. This way you can lift out the whole thing in one go. And lay it down. Always good to keep the box aside, use it for your rubbish. A tidy workspace is a safe workspace, as they say. Get your side cutters, cut the cable ties. There's a few bits wired on, make sure you cut the wire, but careful not to cut the cage of the fan. Should be able to lift that off. Lay it down. We're working on our trusty Ballard's work mat there, so we're not damaging anything. Get rid of the packaging. Unpack this will be the blade. As you're unpacking everything, lay out all the parts. All right, we've got all the components laid out. It's fairly simple. There's also a pedestal version of this fan available. The top part is identical. It's just that you're mounting it to a pedestal rather than to the wall. All right, so you've just got the back part of the fan cage, you've got the fan motor, mounting plate, mounting bracket, fan blades, front cover, and then there's also the little nameplate that comes out of there. You stick on later. Grab the instructions, chuck them away, you don't need them. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to show you it all, make it the easiest way possible. All right, we're going to start with the fan motor. We've stuck that up on the bench so it's easier to work with. We put a bit of paper under there out of the packaging to make sure we don't scratch it or hurt it. These fans can actually be set up to oscillate or be stationary. Particularly with a wall mount, sometimes if they're in the corner, they won't be able to oscillate very well. They'll hit things. So in this occasion, that's what we want to do. We want to set it up so it's not oscillating. When they come out of the box, they are set to oscillate. That arm is what helps it oscillate. You just undo this little bolt, move the arm to the center position there. It'll be threaded the same way. Get the bolt back in. It's only got to be finger tight. It still allows it to move around. And there you have the fan set in whatever position you put it in. Take off this little protector off the spindle. It's where you're going to need your 10mm socket or a screwdriver and get these 4 outer bolts out. And for those of you that are still using a screwdriver or a spanner or an old style ratchet, I'm going to go off, read a magazine, have a cup of coffee while I wait for you to finish, because that's how quick it is when you use the battery ratchet. Next is to get the back cage of the fan on. You see there's 4 tabs to line up. They line up exactly where you took those bolts out of. Doesn't matter which one you line up where, because they're all in the same positions. Get that roughly in place. It does have a little bit of movement, but once you get all the bolts in, they'll be fairly well centered. So just get each one in and start the thread. Right, ready to do them up, and of course when you're doing them up the right way, you're doing them diagonally to make sure that they're all going to be doing up evenly and centered and it doesn't get out of whack. Just check the tightness. Make sure we're not over tightening. They've got to be snug, but don't strip them. Next, the bit that does all the work, the fan blade. You see there's a retaining bolt on it. You want to look through the hole there and make sure that none of that's protruding, so that it's going to slide onto the spindle. Obviously that way down towards the motor, the cone bit towards the top. You also want to have a look at the spindle, and on the spindle at one spot there is a keyway. That's the side you will line your bolt up to. So make sure that all goes down snugly. Tighten it by hand, make sure you're in position. Then you can use your 14mm. Again, it can be a spanner. This is only a nip up, but I'm using the ratchet again. And make sure that's nice and snug. Time for the front part of the cage. There's a couple little tips here that you won't find in the manual. So, at the top centre of the cage, you've got this little locating lug. Most of the time that's squashed down too far to fit in properly. So what you want to do is you get your big flat blade, stick it under there, just prise it out a bit so you've got enough room to work with. Then you want to go around and undo each one of these tabs. Some of them are looser than others, so they're going to keep flopping back, but you've got to make sure they're open. That tip I just gave you with the screwdriver alone will eliminate a heap of F's in the assembly, because it took me a few goes to figure that one out. All right, you want to locate the top centre of the fan body. So you know where the bottom bracket is, obviously the bottom of the fan, and then directly up on the spot where you put that top bolt in. Along that line will be your top centre. You want to get that locating lug that we bent earlier, get it either side of the bar there. Put this down and line it up as much as you can. Then push the bottom one, the direct opposite bottom tab in first. Then we're working diagonals, because if you try and do them all around in order, it'll whack it out of position and you won't get this thing centered. So go to the diagonals, make sure they're together. Sometimes they can be a bit stubborn. Give it a good push. Go to the next diagonal, down there, over to this one, up to that one. Down to the bottom one, and then that one. That's all in place. Last bit to put together on the fan body itself is a little front cover, nameplate, whatever you want to call it. That just clips into place. But again, always good to get it centered. That way the name's going to be fairly level when you put it on. You use your same center point you used before for the front cover. Locate some of these tabs up where they're just going to go over there. Once you're in place, push it down and it's on. You still have a bit of room to move it. Last bit to put on the fan is the mounting bracket. We've got to turn it over. Good to keep your paper there so you're not scratching anything. And we need to get to this part of the bracket. So your fan bracket will come out of the box like this. It's got a locking bolt there. That's a 10mm again. You're going to need to wind that all the way out so it's not protruding on that side. And you're also going to need to undo this nut and bolt with the spring washer. You see it only goes in one way and it locks. So you've only got to, you don't have to hold it when you're doing it up. Also another little cool feature, you got a little cable holder here. So depending on how far your power point is away, it's somewhere that you can actually secure the cable so it's never going to interfere with the fan. Get that into position. Spring washer on the outside. Get the nut up to a point. This part of the process is where you determine how much angle you want to put on the fan. That can be dependent on how high it is mounted off the ground as to where you want to point it. You can adjust it once it's up on the wall. But it is easier if you can do these adjustments this way. And in this case, we know we want them pointed down or angling down as far as we can. So you just get the bracket just off hitting the cage. If it can hit it, it won't hurt the fan, but you will get a vibration through it. So it's better not to have it touching. Once you've decided your angle and you've got that set, you can hold that in place. Grab your 19mm spanner and tighten it up. You can see if you've got a ratcheting one, how that's easier. And you want to get that fairly tight. It's a big bolt, it can take a fair bit of torque. Once that's done, get your 10mm again and just nip up this locking bolt to make it a little bit more secure. All right, that's the assembly part done. That's the bit that usually has the most F's in it, and that was pretty F-free. Now what we've got to do is get the mounting bracket on the wall and get this up there. Now before we go rushing like a bull at a gate to stick the mounting bracket on the wall, just take some time to figure out how this actually works so that we know where to put it. The fan itself is capable of being mounted two ways, and again that depends on how much space you've got. If you've got a low ceiling and you want to get under it, you can actually hang the fan off this bar that way, straight off the bottom of the bracket. You've got two retaining bolts that will hold it into place. You can see on here there's a hole, and they've set that up so that you should be using, there's two length retaining bolts. You should use the long one to go into that hole, particularly when you are hanging down, because it makes it more secure and it can't drop out of the bracket if the nuts become loose. Or you can mount it the other way and you can mount it downways into the bracket where it's more secure and it absolutely can never fall out. They say to use the long bolt in that hole in that situation as well, but as we've found in certain positions, you can't line that hole up. If you feel better, you can drill another hole. But when it is downward mounted, there's nowhere for it to go anywhere, so it's really not crucial to line that hole up. Now before we get up on the wall, it's also good to get these retaining bolts in the right position. This is 12mm. Just run them out so they're not protruding. There's not a lot of thickness there too, so in some cases you may need to take the bolts all the way out. In this situation we're mounting into steel. They can go anywhere. We're using 12 gauge tech screws. If you're going to timber, coach bolts, something sturdy that's going to hold them up into place is good to use. We also found too that these tech screws are struggling to get through the steel self-tapping, so we are pre-drilling. Top tip to save yourself a lot of time mucking around trying to measure up 3 or 4 holes. By the way, 3 screws is more than enough to hold these in. You can put all 4 if you want, but we're going with 3. But instead of having to go up there and find where level is and where we've got to put each hole, we know our height, so we've already pre-drilled the first hole. So it's very easy then to get the first screw in and makes it much easier to find a level. Oops, almost forgot. I don't want everybody on the internet to come down on me for not having the right safety gear. Got to put the most important thing on. High vis. High vis means I can do absolutely anything now. I can hang off the rafters and do whatever I want. Nothing can possibly happen to you when you're wearing high vis. Safety covered. This is where you get your level. We did the first screw up fairly snug so that this stays into place and allows me to fine tune, adjust it to level, and look at that. Ready to drill the next hole. There is a bit of leeway in these holes, so you don't have to be too pedantic about getting dead center. Near enough is good enough. There's enough leeway in all of that to be able to move it around and get it level once you're putting the screws in. We're just going to use a little 4mm bit. That's all we need. Means we'll get through the steel a bit quicker. And as always, we're using a bit of cutting fluid because the bit will last a hell of a lot longer, and believe it or not, you go through quicker. Right, check the level again, make sure we haven't moved it out. Just got to come down a little bit. Good, and we can get that next screw in. Right, we're all set. There's no chance of knocking that out of level now. We'll get our last hole in and the last screw. As I said, look, if you want to use all 4 holes, that's up to you. I have said the mantra of that ain't going nowhere, so 3 is more than enough to hold that in place. All right, for this next bit, most normal people would probably ask someone to give them a hand. It can be fiddly, and when you're getting up top, it can be a little bit heavy, but no one ever accused me of being normal, so I'm going to get this done by myself, like any superhuman would. Now, because we're hanging down, it makes it much easier for the install. Once it's in place, not going anywhere. If you were hanging it from underneath you, you would definitely need someone to give you a hand to hold it up while you did the retaining bolts. So once you've decided on what position you want the fan to be in, this one is about there. Get your 12mm again, do up the retaining bolts. That's in place. Now with this one, the power point for this fan is hardwired into a main switch, so we don't have to keep climbing up the ladder, turning it on and off. So in that case, we're going to set it at the speed we want it to, which will be on 3, which is flat out, because also we can control how fast they're going to go from the central switch. All right, we've got it plugged in. I'm just going to use a cable tie just to neaten up the excess cable and to make sure it's all out of the way. It is a workshop, I don't have to be too pretty. All right, ready to turn on. There you go, job well done. The shed is a hell of a lot cooler. Nice breeze coming through right now. And you are as expert as I am at assembling and installing the Detroit wall fans. Make sure you get into a Total Tools store, ask the guys which is the best cooling solution for your situation. Anyhow, as always, like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you soon.